welcome to the Passenger Seat Podcast, a podcast designed to fill your passenger seat with chat about classic cars, all recorded from my 1968 Morris Minor Peggy. I'm Becca, and I'm going to be telling you today how an oil change made me think that my electronic ignition had gone, adding further to the infinite stories that seem to happen around me and oil changes. So if you are a long-time enjoyer of the podcast, you will know that oil changes has been a bit of a nemesis of mine, mostly caused by the fact that I have the original sort of oil filter on the engine that always seems to cause me a lot of trouble. We've had issues with me kind of losing all of the innards. We've had issues with me getting oil everywhere when it refuses to kind of reseal up. And last year I kind of had the final nail in the coffin in the fact that I thought I'd done a really good oil change and I'd got the hang of it, and then as I was driving around Yorkshire my oil pressure light came on. I obviously panicked and was like, quick, put some oil in. So pulled over, put some more oil in, and again we'd found that it had become unseated and was not sealing properly, and oil had been escaping, but not quite at the rate that it had previously. So it had taken a little while for it to really start to cause problems. So at that point, my decision was that the next time I did an oil change, it would be a case of, let's get a spin-on filter. I finally caved, I'm going to get a spin-on oil filter. So I got one and got it all kind of sorted and ready to fit, and unfortunately I've not had to do that much mileage, so it had kind of got to the point where I needed to do it, but it had taken a little while, which meant that I'd kind of not had to stress about it. It stopped losing oil and stuff, and I was kind of dreading having to do the switch over to the spin-on filter, because these things never go to plan for me, and unfortunately this situation was much the same. So I went round to my dad's this time to get his assistance with it, and just to make sure that it went as smoothly as possible, but also because I knew there was going to be some tools that would make it easier that he has that I don't. So for example, a stud remover and things like that. So I got there, we started draining the oil, got it all in the bucket, so that was good. Got the old filter off, and again didn't make too much of a mess there, so that was a big relief. And it was then a case of, okay, how do we get to the bit where the filter attaches onto and get that off and get the new spin-on connector put on. And we decided that the easiest thing to do was probably to remove the alternator that was on there and get that off to give us a little bit more space. And so that's what we went about doing. Pretty straightforward, all going well so far. We get the oil pipe off, realise that that's going to need a little bit of tweaking and bending, because the new spin-on attachment is a little bit closer to the engine, so that oil pipe that comes kind of from the top of the case down to the oil filter was going to need to come completely off, and us tweak it a little bit there. So once that was off, we were able to take the where the traditional oil filter attaches on off, get the stud remover in there, start removing the studs that go into the block, and all together it's going reasonably smoothly. We remove the oil drip tray from underneath because all of the oil's out, put the new sump plug washer in and put the sump plug back in, and it's all been quite good. No unexpected kind of things attached to the magnetic sump plug. everything okay. We then start to go about popping the new studs in and attaching the new filter connector on, attach the pipe on, all very good. And then it's a case of me going from underneath, having filled up the new filter, which is infinitely easier than trying to fill up and balance the old canister type, and attach that on. So we're like, great, this has gone well, and we attach the alternator, and we think we're on to a bit of a winner. Everything's reconnected back up, and we go inside and have lunch. It's taken us kind of about an hour and a half, and we're reasonably happy with that. I then, after lunch, go to head home, and I have to take Peggy out of the back of his back garden and start to drive off, and something's kind of not quite right. She's struggling to pull off, and then stuttering and stalling. And I'm like, okay, that's weird. Go in the engine bay, check that the vacuum and vents and stuff is all put back on, because we'd moved that all out of the way. And yeah, doesn't seem to be anything obviously wrong. So just kind of wiggle all of my spark plug leads and everything, and kind of go, okay, right, we'll turn it off. It's off now. Start it up again. She starts fine, but then again completely loses power. And luckily I'm within walking distance of my parents, so I walk back up to my dad and say, I'm not sure what's going on. I'm just down the bottom here. Shall we have a look? So he comes and has a look. We check, we've got spark. It's not a great spark, but we've got spark. We've got fuel. We've got compression. We check the distributor to see what's going on as to why we've not got perhaps the strongest spark. And the spark goes, and we're like, okay, that's a bit weird. But we clean up the rotor arm because that's looking a little bit dubious. And think, okay, that's a little bit cleaner. Pop that back in, she works. I go around the block, not a problem. So I'm then like, great, I think we're sorted. I will head home. I get about 20 to 25 minutes into my way home. I live about 30 minutes on a gentle drive away from my parents, and loses all power again. So I managed to get myself pulled over. Not great. I'm kind of just inside a little road that leads to people's houses, and I can't push her myself any further in because it's uphill. But thankfully, a lovely gentleman who owned some classic minis comes home, and he spots me there and helps me kind of push a little bit more out of the way. I'm also visited by a local Morris Minor owner who spots me there and checks that I'm okay. And at this point we think it's the rotor arm, and we're like, right, let's see if we can swap a different rotor arm on and if that works. So Dad comes to meet me with a spare rotor arm that he has. That doesn't fix it. We put on a spare dizzy cap. That doesn't do it. So at that point we're like, the electronic ignition must have gone, which seems quite unlikely given that it's given quite a lot of faultless service at this point. Most of the people that we know that have had issues, it's been a case of dead on arrival rather than kind of dying in progress. So quite surprised at that, but Dad's come along in the camper van, so the decision is we'll just tow her home and then try out my points and condenser dizzy at home, see if that works. So we get home, set up all of the timing and stuff for the points and condenser dizzy, and notice that actually one of the wires from the electronic ignition to the coil has come loose and does not connect to its connector very well. So actually what we've got is a bad spark because the power that's going to the distributor was wrong. But we've just set all of this up. We're both tired. It's been a longer day than we expected. So Dad's like, I'll come back tomorrow with some crimping stuff and some other options, and we'll try putting the electronic ignition back in, and we'll go from there. So he comes back, we set the electronic ignition back up, put the wire in and crimp it properly, and lo and behold, it does work, just not quite right. So we end up messaging and saying, can you guys sanity check us, to some friends of ours, and turned out that we'd got the wires on the HT lead one kind of spot over wrong. It was starting I think on 3 rather than starting on 1. So after much frustration we get there eventually, and all happy that all works. That's good. Takes us a little bit of time to sort the timing out, but we get there in the end. But my goodness, I just can't get anywhere with winning on these oil changes. I'm really hoping that the switch to the spin-on filter does end up solving this being my nemesis, and really the oil change had gone to plan. It was everything else that we kind of knocked and jostled in the process that had caused this issue with my electronic ignition, and thankfully alerted me to this issue with the wire relatively local to home, rather than it being this weekend when I'm at the Resto show or trying to get to the Resto show, where Peggy's going to be on the Morris Minor Owners Club stand. And thankfully we got there in the end, but my goodness, there was some panic when we thought it was the electronic ignition, and then for it to be the wire, whilst a favourable option in the long term, was quite annoying when we got all the way into setting up the points and condenser distributor that I had as a spare. But we do know that the points and condenser one works now, because it was a spare that a friend of ours had given me. So I know that that's a good spare to be carrying in the back, but hopefully I won't need it, because we've properly crimped all of those wires and got them seated properly, and it'll hopefully not be an issue again for a while at least. But my goodness, what a faff. And I'd love to hear about when you've gone to do one job and it's spiraled, or it's ended up causing issues in other areas instead, just so that I don't feel quite so alone. So be sure to share those over on social media with me, or in the comments on the YouTube video. If you're going to be at the Resto show this weekend, I look forward to seeing you. Obviously when this goes out, Peggy will already be locked up in the halls. We're in hall 4 on stand 650, I think it is, which is the Morris Minor Owners Club stand, and she's got a lot of pressure on her. She is going to be the shining example on the stand as a kind of freshly restored car to compare to the other cars that the young members are providing and working on the stand. So low pressure for me over the weekend in terms of I don't have to do any work on her, because clearly that's going really well lately, but high pressure in making sure she looks her absolute best to act as an absolutely fantastic contrast. And it should be a really good lineup of cars. We've got 2 Trafalgar blue cars that will be kind of the contrast to her, in the fact that they are cars that are still being actively improved and worked on. I mean, obviously I'm still doing lots of stuff on Peggy, but at least visually she's at her peak. And then we've got a total bare shell that's that really start of a restoration kind of job, whether you take the leap and go for that, or whether it's going to forever be that shell of a car. And hopefully a rat mog as well as another example of something completely different. And the 2 Trafalgar Blues and the rat mog is what we are hoping to see some work being done on over the weekend. And it's really nice because all the young members are pulling together to help each other out on the jobs, to make sure that everybody gets everything done over the weekend. So yeah, that's how my oil change resulted in me thinking that my electronic ignition was dead, which is just the most ridiculous story, to be honest. But we got there in the end, and she's going beautifully once again. Big thanks to my dad, as always, for helping me out and supporting me with doing all of these jobs on her and keeping her going, and helping me meet deadlines, like getting her to the Resto show this weekend. Hopefully the weather stays as glorious as this, so the wash that I did on her over the weekend holds up beautifully for the show in a few days' time. But in the meantime, thank you ever so much for listening. Drive safely and happy motoring.